Now for today's Grimm adventure, we find ourselves once again high above Los Angeles at the Griffith Observatory. Today we're going to be talking about the death of actor Sal Mineo, who played Plato in a movie that we all know and love called Rebel Without a Cause. I'm going to try really hard not to make this a video about James Dean because, well, to be honest, he has enough legend and lore and stories to have his own video, which we'll do at some point. But today, it's all about Plato, Sal Mineo.
Wherever I come, bad luck is coming my way. Wherever I go, hard luck is there to stay. Good luck never stays a day. A bad luck's always coming my way.
Now, a little bit later on in this video, we're going to go to where actor Sal Mineo died in real life in West Hollywood. But in the movie Rebel Without a Cause, his character Plato died right here on the steps of Griffith Observatory. What you're looking at right now is the main thoroughfare, I guess you would call it, in the movie, at the end of the movie Rebel Without a Cause. This is where all the police cars would have been waiting. This is where it all went down.
No! Turn out the lights! Jim!
Now I want to draw your attention to that door right there. Now in Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean would have walked out that door towards right where I am with his hands up saying, "Ray, can you get everybody back, please?" And as he does that, eventually Plato runs out that door, the same door, off to the left, and he gets shot and killed right over here in this little walkway, this little pathway that goes down towards the back where they also filmed some other scenes earlier in the movie. Sometimes it's pretty surreal walking and standing in places that have cinematic history, such as this from Rebel Without a Cause. Now in this scene, as Plato's running out the door, James Dean kind of dives across in an effort to stop him. And he lands right here, about this angle, in front of this door. 1955. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, one of the big reasons why I wanted to start the story of Sal Mineo off here at Griffith Observatory is because of a certain legend, a certain story that kind of surrounds Rebel Without a Cause. You see, there's a lot of people out there who have these crazy conspiracy theories and think that James Dean characters in this movie was kind of like the angel of death. And there's a couple different reasons to support this. Now this is purely coincidence, but you see that door right there, how it looks like there's a spiderweb emblem on it? That's the door Plato would have come out at the end of the movie right before he dies. Now some of the stories that kind of support the James Dean being the angel of death theory is the gun that he was holding, Plato, belonged to James Dean in the movie. The red jacket that Plato was wearing belonged to James Dean as well. In fact, at the beginning of the movie, it was James Dean's character, Jim, in the police station. He offers it to Plato because Plato was feeling cold. Later on in the movie, when he puts it on him, he zips it up, kind of like he's zipping up a body bag. Kind of dark if you think about it, but there's one more story that kind of outshines the rest of them. It's inside this observatory where the kids are attending a field trip earlier in the movie, and they find out about the world ending, and Plato asks Jim if the world is going to end at night. And James Dean, Jim, I keep calling him James Dean, he assures him that the world is going to end at dawn, in a way kind of predicting when Plato dies. And it happens right here on the steps to the observatory. It's pretty chilling if you think about it. Like I said, I don't want this video to turn into a story about James Dean, but because it's Rebel Without a Cause and because, you know, who he was, why not? I mean, we're here, so we're gonna take a look at a statue real quick, as well as one of the most famous filming locations from Rebel Without a Cause. And then we're gonna head to where Sal Mineo died, sadly. Right around the time that Jessica and I moved here, we stopped up here at the Griffith Observatory and did a video on the statue, mainly because it was kind of creepy if you think about it. If you look very closely, his eyes are missing. Not there at all. It's a little disturbing. There's a closer look at the statue with a lack of eyes, I should say. If you look very closely off in the distance, you can see the Hollywood sign as well. Even though it is a statue of James Dean, I should point out that technically this is not a statue for James Dean. It's more for how Rebel Without a Cause put Griffith Observatory on the map. The knife fight scene, which is I'm going to show you where that happened in just a moment, as well as where Plato died, that is what pretty much started Griffith Observatory being in so many different movies, from Terminator to Charlie's Angels to The Rocketeer, so many things. Sadly, it's closed. I wish we can get inside there and take a look at the observatory. They said that it's open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so we're probably gonna have to come back and do a video specific on that. Now, after spending time in the observatory, they're getting ready to leave, and the gang, I guess you can call them thugs, they decided they're gonna pick a fight with James Dean character, Jim. And they wait for him outside. Now, Jim and Plato leave out the back, and they come around to where James Dean's car is parked. They pop his tire with a switchblade, and they have a bit of a knife fight. One of my favorite things about this scene, the observatory scene, is I remember growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and attending something called the Buell Planetarium. And it was something very similar where you sit in a dark room with a dome and they show you different stars and they talk about everything. The planetarium here, the observatory, it's that building, or that giant structure right there with the dome top on it. Now you see these little structures over here to the left? As James Dean comes out the back, there's a shot of him standing against the wall over there as well. Now we're gonna go down there in just a minute, but that telescope right there, that little point that's facing downtown Los Angeles, this is where the knife fight happened. Jim's car would have been parked right about there. Now keep in mind, this is 1955 and a lot has changed in the skyline. Now I don't know if you guys get the same feeling I do walking over to the outlook point where James Dean had the knife fight in Rebel Without a Cause, but this is it. This is where they did that little dance. They weren't trying to kill each other. They were just kind of, you know, showing each other who's boss, who's man enough, who's the bigger badass. But it all happened right here.
I thought only punks fought with knives.
Well, who's fighting? I'm fighting. It's examination time, man. It's a crazy game.
It's things like this, these iconic filming locations, that I absolutely love. Now before we leave, let's go ahead and take a good look at this view. It is a beautiful day for a little bit of exercising. Standing up here, overlooking Hollywood, Los Angeles. It blows my mind every single day that Jessica and I live here, that we call this place home.
I received a phone call from a police officer who immediately told me that Sal was killed, and I just couldn't believe it.
37-year-old actor Sal Mineo was found lying on the ground with blood flowing from his body. Stabbed in the chest, he died before paramedics could take him to the hospital. Witnesses said they had seen a young white male with blonde hair fleeing the scene.
The story of Sal Mineo brings us to 8569 West Holloway Drive. Right now, I'm standing in the alleyway behind the apartment buildings, or the condos, I guess you should say, of where he was living. February 12th, 1976 is the day that he died, and it was a very senseless murder. The carport I was just showing you is not where Sal Mineo was living back in 1976. In fact, his home is pretty much at the far end of the alleyway, but this is the alley where in February 12th, 1976, he came home from rehearsing a play that he was in called P.S. Your Cat is Dead. He parked his car in a carport. I'm going to show you that carport. And as he was walking up to his house, he was stabbed in the heart once. And there are a few different crime scene photos. I'm going to show you those as well and kind of line up things. It was just after 9 p.m. on February 12th when Sal Mineo drove his car right up this alleyway Now, you see those two dumpsters? This one right here is where he would have parked his car. Parked it, got out, and was walking up this little staircase right here down to his apartment, which would have been down on the left-hand side. And they think that whoever it was, well, now we know who killed him, but at the time it was unsolved. But somebody, they think, jumped out behind a trash can to rob him, scared Sal Mineo, and Sal Mineo started confronting him, kind of like yelling at him. And the intent, they think, was to rob him. And in an effort to try to, silence Sal Mineo, the assailant lunged at him with a switchblade and stabbed him once in the heart. Not even 10 minutes later, Sal Mineo was dead. Basically, they think it was a botched robbery, that somebody waited here in West Hollywood in this alleyway for somebody to come home, anybody to come home. And they were gonna rob him, and he started screaming and kind of confronting him, and then it went wrong. And ultimately, it didn't take anything. He had his watch still on him, he had his wallet, his keys, his money on him. Immediately after being stabbed, Sal Mineo starts calling out, screaming out, "Oh my God, oh my God." And people in the apartment building, as well as the building across the alleyway here, look out their window and they see, and they don't see his face, but they see somebody running down the alleyway and getting into a car and driving off. Now here's something that I found very interesting. Right here, this little carport is where he would have parked his car, and right there by those steps is where he was stabbed. Now, by all the police crime scene photos that you can find online, his body was actually found laying over here. Now, I've looked, I've read interviews, different accounts, and nobody nowhere says anything about after he was stabbed if he, ran down the alleyway. He might have stumbled down here. But if I turn right about here, this is about the location where the crime scene photo was taken. And you see how it has that water stain coming down the driveway? It's downhill. His body was found face down. And when everybody came out of the apartment buildings, one of his neighbors, somebody who knew who he was, turned him over onto his back. But in the different interviews, they were saying that Sal Mineo's blood, there was a trail coming down the driveway to a drain about 10 feet away. Quite some time after that, fast forward in the future, a guy by the name of Lionel Ray Williams was serving time in a jail in a separate state. He was overheard bragging that he was the one who stabbed Sal Mineo. They brought him back here to California, ended up going to jail. I think he was sentenced to 51 years, got out on parole, violated parole, and went right back into jail. It's crazy, all this history here in Hollywood with all these different celebrities. And I mean, somebody was just telling me that Marilyn Monroe even lived for a short time in one of these buildings. It's kind of mind-blowing. With that being said, thank you for joining us on another grim adventure, this time to Griffith Observatory in West Hollywood, visiting the home and death site of actor Sal Mineo. Very sad, only 37 years old.
Wherever I come, bad luck is coming my way. Wherever I go, hard luck is there to stay. Good luck never stays a day. Bad luck's always coming my way.